Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Supernatural Substation. I'm your host, Alyne Pustanio, and with me is my co-host, Bernadine Richardson. Hey, Bernadine.
Hey everybody.
How you doing?
I hope everybody is doing great. Summertime's coming, Alyne.
I know it. I know
I
it's
know we don't
coming.
like that heat. Oh my goodness.
The heat, hell's front
I like the
porch.
cool, but I don't like the heat.
I'm kind of ready for it. I have to, of course, check me in July at some point. I'll be bitching
Yeah,
about it,
check
but
you in July.
yeah, check me on that. But after this snow and rain, and then the groundhog let us down. He came out and he was right. And I don't know about you, but it's been freaking windy. Like there's that
Mhm.
old saying that says March comes in like a lion and goes out like a lamb. And I'm like, it needs to leave. Okay. Wind. I have never wind. Just it's just ridiculous. I've never seen, like it's like we live on in Nebraska and there's nothing to break the wind. And it's like these gusts of wind all over the place, things damaged and blowing everything. I just can't deal with that. So we are here tonight with the third part in our series, Supernatural Dangers of Paranormal Exploration. We finished up last week talking about susceptibility to spirit intrusion and incursion. There was something I forgot to mention that I wanted to mention. It has to do with physical health and mental health, but people who get attachments more easily tend to have health issues, may have underlying health issues. Like you have an immune system to diseases, you have a spiritual immune system too. So anybody who's getting involved or is going back to or has been involved in paranormal investigation or research for a long time knows the effect that it can have on your psyche and on your physical health as well. So it's always good to be at the top as much as you can be physical form. You know what I mean? You don't go in there with when you have a cold, a depressed immune system if you're getting over something. You don't go in there just having gorged yourself on a whole meal food or whatever, because anything, they can attach to anything that means inside your body as well. Just basically staying fit, as fit as possible. You don't have to go be working out and all this stuff, but trying to keep in mind and staying healthy, especially like within a week or so before you go and participate in an investigation. You might lighten up on the things that usually may cause you issues, like sugar or drinking alcohol, other stuff you may do that legal or not. That too, you kind of don't want to put yourself into a situation where you're weakened in any way, like your aura and your magnetic energy is weakened enough for something to attach and leave with you. So that was something I wanted to mention for last week's show, and it
Well,
kind of had.
especially your mental health,
Mm-hmm.
even if it's only um like say you just got into an argument with your boyfriend or just an example,
Mm-hmm.
it's attached to negativity. So if
Yeah.
you go into an investigation and you have something in the back of your mind that's distracting you from what you're supposed to be doing, you know, some supernatural energies, entities, whatever you want to call them, they know. They
Oh
just
yeah.
know.
Mm-hmm. Oh
We
yeah.
had one lady comment on our part one,
Oh
and
really?
she said the thing is, I don't see danger. I probably should, but I don't.
Yep. You have to assume.
Yes, you probably should. Yes, ma'am.
You just have to assume it may never happen to you. it may never happen, and that's great. No, I mean, anything, not it being it, but something may never happen to you, but then again, it could be, the worst possible. It could be something. Spirits that are, and we're going to talk about this a little bit tonight, spirits that are seeking an attachment, looking for a way to connect with material reality, with a physical person. The lower etheric spirits who are like looking for that. They're looking for a way to communicate or get back into, or, ride along in physical reality to vicariously experience life again. They only have to get it right one time. Once. They only have to hit you once at that bad time. And that's it. You need to make sure you get it right as possible all along. And this goes for magical workings too. It's interesting that, especially the more rigorous ritual magic, ceremonial, of like you're going to, let's say, conjure a demon. Listen, all of you amateur demon conjurers out there. If you're going to do something like that, a magical working like that, you are advised a whole month ahead to start fasting, to stop having sex, to cut your food intake of certain foods, to isolate yourself. I don't mean completely, but as much as possible from people and things that cause you to get annoyed, aggravated, that rile up your anger. You're basically like a priest prepares for exorcism, or a priest, or like the Catholic Lenten season of fasting, preparing for, when Christ resurrects. Or it's just, you want to be as clean as possible and as copacetic as possible and as balanced as you can possibly get before you go into trying to draw and manifest a demon into physical reality. And you can say, well, I'm not going to do that. No, but in paranormal investigations, you may walk into a location where somebody just tried that, or tried it and failed, and now they're calling y'all to come in there. And so,
well, sometimes they can invite a spirit entity, supernatural, paranormal. Some take an invitation, to be able to come into you. But sometimes they can invite, not accidentally, but things that they like, say, provoking.
Yeah.
If somebody said, oh, well, you pick on so and so, why don't you just come into me and pick on me? Well, that's your invitation. That's their invitation. You just invited them.
Right. Exactly.
It's that easy.
It is. And they'll go then after that, they'll go bother so-and-so, and then they'll leave and they'll go bother you. It doesn't matter. The spatial time does not influence them. They don't care if you live somewhere 10, 15, 20 miles away from this person. They're going to connect with you. They're going to aggravate you and then go back and aggravate that person. And you're not going to be able to help that person at all.
They'll follow you.
Yeah, they'll follow whoever. Especially if they need that contact for whatever reason, if they need to have that, if they've been lingering around hoping that they can just get, for whatever reason, whatever they feel like, they just don't, they don't like where they are, they're scared, they're whatever, they feel more connected if they're connected to human activity, whatever, But we're going to go into a little bit more. Let's just kick it off by saying tonight is about the experimentation, or just the situations that the paranormal investigator can find him or herself dealing with in any location. Like, most of I mean, Dean, you mostly do homes, right? I mean, even though you've done locations, most of your investigations have been private residences or private sites, right?
Right.
Yeah. So, if you're coming in a residence and you don't know what these people have been up, obviously something's going on, but you don't know what these people have been up to. So you prepare yourself for something like occult activity, spiritual activity, meaning like, the new agey kind of stuff, psychic activity, and other people playing with paranormal, devices for paranormal investigating like they see on TV. So, you come in family, you do all the assessments, and we can get into that, about what's the best way to assess them, how you do it, Dean. But let's say, there's somebody, when we talk about a cult in an environment that you're coming in, we're talking about magic of all kinds, including Wicca, pagan beliefs, etc., voodoo, hoodoo, any kind of magic like that. And then the spiritual stuff, Ouija boards, seances, divination, because divination has a spirit attached to it. Superstitious activity, doing superstitious things like, that would be kind of like a hoodoo, like doing things to keep spirits in or out or whatever. And also yoga and new age stuff. Then you get the psychic. The psychic experimentation kind of goes hand in hand with the untrained paranormal investigation. This is where you get a lot of people who say, I'm an empath today. I'm today old and I'm an empath. I'm a sensitive. I'm a psychic, because like the woman we discussed last week, I smelled sulfur. It's a demon. Okay.
Right.
Right. Well, all I can say is there sure as hell or have been a lot more empaths, people saying, I'm sensitive and I'm an empath. And I'm not trying to run you all down. I'm just saying that there was a dramatic increase in empaths and psychics and sensitives after Dead Files started coming on and ghost hunters and all the other stuff. Oh, I'm that's me. Okay. And then paranormal, investigations where you just go in and you have made no assessment of the situation, and insisting it's paranormal when it could be anything else like mental problems, faking, or as we talked about last week, insisting there's no such thing as the paranormal, but you're investigating it anyway. And then there are physical dangers to investigating, that we can talk about. And there are people who willingly invite and they seek out the supernatural, just like you were just talking about. There are people who, a Ouija board, for instance, right? And there are other certain activities, such as like self-induced astral projection, where you deliberately train yourself, to leave your body, where you do the whole meditative thing and you project out astrally. And this leaves you open to attachment and intrusions. And an intruding, like I said, an intruding spirit only needs to get it right one time. They only need to, if they're around you and their intent, it's usually the very low vibration spirits that are in the lower etheric, that are hanging around close to the magnetic sphere, through the earth sphere, to our plane of existence. Then if they see an in, it doesn't matter who, they go from place to place. They're just looking for, like a little light to go on in the etheric, and they go over to it. And so if you're training yourself to astral project, you are literally you're projecting your spirit out of your body. Now you're still tethered to the body because of the soul, but you're basically vacating and sending your consciousness out of your body and leaving it there. Well, that's perfect time for intrusions. So that's an issue. And then a lot happened, like when we had the big spiritualist movement at the beginning of the last century, the end of the 19th, and then in the beginning of the 20th century, where everybody was table tipping and seancing, and now, it was all this, and Madame Blavatsky and the great white chiefs and this spirit guides and this and that. All that did, one of the worst things it did was make everybody feel like that the entities that they could encounter were all well-intentioned and only had their best interests, the best interests of the humans in mind. And that is a big problem that's still there. How many times have you and I talked to people who have said, all these spirits are fine? I remember very vividly, we were at one of the Pensacola Paracons, I think, and I had spoken about the things that had happened to my mom and things that had happened to me and other people I know because of the, experimentation in these paranormal and esoteric activities. And somebody stood up and said, I just want to tell everybody, all spirits are good. And you remember that, Dean? Were you there?
Yeah.
I was there. I remember that. I was like, okay. And they're all like clapping. And that's when Dave Schrader did his, made fun of me. I guess he felt comfortable because there were some people who clapped and all. And I'm like, look, okay, if all spirits were good, they wouldn't need you to talk to them. They wouldn't need any of these guys that are sitting up here to help them out if they were all good. Okay. There wouldn't be a paranormal field of investigation, including from ghosts to cryptids, if they were all good. Okay. Just stop and think about that. If they were all benign and only had your best interests in mind, then none of this would be going on. Right. So just take that for what it's worth. There's centuries, I'm talking back through antiquity, of there is more literature and more warnings and writings about the bad things that happen when you encounter the spirit world in this way, anyway, outside of at that, if you're talking in the Middle Ages, et cetera, religion, there's more of that kind of writing than there is anybody having good experiences with, let's say summoning one of these hypercosmic demons into reality. There's a shit ton more of bad experiences and warnings about what you shouldn't do than there is about successful workings, et cetera. And everything went well and they only had my best interests in mind. Right. Okay. So I put that on the stupid spiritualist movement, the Blavatsky crap, the knock 3 times and giving us answers. And, I put that on that because a lot of that was charlatans. A lot of it was just entertainment.
The cheesecloth, ectoplasm.
Yeah.
Right.
Ectoplasm's a real thing. It's one way of manifestation from the lower etheric into our reality. Those spirits can use, we were talking about humidity a minute ago. They can use our atmosphere. They can use that to, condensate in the atmosphere to manifest to people, and it is possible for them to do it. But these people were spitting out tissue paper all the freaking time. Okay. You can go back and you can look at the pictures. Yeah, of the so-called ghosts. And obviously there's so many fakes. I mean, it doesn't even bear talking about. But even, who was active in that time and who was a real opponent of it and attempted to out it was Harry Houdini. Harry Houdini, the great magician and escape artist. He said, and I wrote it down. What did he say? Harry Houdini, he was quoted as saying that he personally knew 5 people who were driven insane through Ouija board use. So, and he famously told his wife, who was a believer in spiritualism, that if there was an other world, an unseen world, that he would come back to her and give her a sign. Now, he meant if it really existed. Obviously, it existed, but he didn't come back and give her a sign. He never did, right? But obviously he continued, unless he was grabbed when he got over there by the purgatory police and he was taken to purgatory, or hell. I mean, I hope not. He didn't seem like that bad of a person, but who knows, right? But as far as anybody knows, he didn't. But he may have, and the wife didn't say anything. He never came back, okay, and gave her any kind. He probably figured, wow, look at all these women over here. I'm going to stay over here. I don't care. Really, but I mean, he was must have been pretty much occupied with the process of dying and all this to worry about coming back. Now, there are instances where ghosts have come back, where people have made agreements. We're talking human ghosts, okay? But those spiritualists, and then the whole second blush of people who were dealing with psychokinesis and ESP, and more than, I'm talking about like in Lorraine Warren's day, in the Warrens' day, there was that whole group of new agey people who were starting all that crap. Everybody's fine. We're wonderful. We're all one connected being. It's so wonderful. Lotus flowers, and it's no. Okay, no. That is an uncharted country. And the only way you can find out really what it's all about is to die and go there. That unseen world is completely uncharted. So the best that you have is the thing that is usually dismissed by most paranormal investigators, and it's occult tradition, the writings of the priests of the Middle Ages who did all this stuff, who figured out ways, who used the oldest rituals. I'm talking Babylonian, Sumerian, Persian, all this magic, did it the way they did it, had the same results, met the same entities in whatever cases, and they wrote a bunch of crap basically saying, beware of this. This is how bad it can be. So, if you want to stand up and embarrass somebody, like this guy did, I can't even remember his name. He was another speaker there, but I can't remember who he was. But, I do remember vividly. What?
Didn't he have red hair?
He did. I don't know. I remember him looking kind of like a lounge lizard with some, polyester coat on or something like that. Oh, these spirits are good. Yeah, okay. My mom's dead, but if she could, if she could be standing here today, she'd probably slap your stupid ass and tell you, yeah, all right. Because they helped put her in the grave. Okay. And I had just gotten finished talking about that. And he stood up and did that. And then Dave Schrader made fun. But I digress. Okay. Let's get back on the rails with that. But I mean, he was totally wrong. And remember that. Because all these guides and chiefs and all that.
Spirits that were bad in life, like hateful people, are not going to change when they die.
No. That doesn't improve anybody as far as
have their personalities.
Yeah, and they're probably worse because now they're dead. And they're frustrated because they're not in the physical world, and they can't directly affect things like they did until they begin to realize that they can do other things, and then they can torment. And like I've said, and we've said this a lot, the things that people call devils, the devils that are out there are spirits of dead humans as well as inhumans, but there are a lot of dead human spirits out there who were ruined in their life and are condemned to be with the demons, who want to ruin other people's lives and want to, make more devils to torment humanity and to torment the living. That's their only purpose. And they hang around close to our sphere of existence. They don't go far because they may be caught by other higher spirits who will take them out of it. They don't want that. They don't want to pass through the process. But they've been out there so long that the effect that they have on us is indistinguishable from a demon affecting us. It's the same thing, only like less intelligent, not as maliciously, trying. Like the demons are intelligences, and they can figure anything out, and they can just completely bamboozle you. But these other spirits are baser in their nature, and so they do ruin because they're ruined. And that's what they did in life, and they continue to do it in death. And the last thing you want is one of these attached to you, you know, one of these in your house. And so if you're a paranormal investigator, you don't know that somebody might have been doing something in your house or in the house that you're going into, in this family. And one of the most common occult, or I would say occult practices or magical practices, is the Ouija board. And so I thought we could go into that because seances, divination, and all that kind of falls still under that heading. And I thought we could go into the Ouija board a little bit because this is a big danger to any investigator that's coming in the house, because it's thought of as so harmless. It still has the reputation of being a game. It's harmless. It's something that people play with all the time.
As entertainment only.
Mm-hmm.
For entertainment purposes only in the toy department.
Right. It says it. It says it on the box, I believe. It's for entertainment purposes only. But there are 3 schools of thought. There are people who are for it. There are people who are mixed about it. And there are people who are against it. And I happen to be in the third group. I'm against it because of the amount of the dangers, not just to you, the user, but to everybody around you. There's a book called Ouija, The Most Dangerous Game. It's by an author called Stoker Hunt. And I quoted it in my book. So I'm going to take a minute and just read what he had to say about the Ouija board. Or contacting through it. The invader focuses on the victim's character weaknesses. If one is vain, appeals to vanity are made. I need your help, the seducer will say. Only you can help me. The entity is malicious and does not hesitate to lie, misrepresent itself, usually as a deceased loved one, and flatter. It's better for the invader, of course, if the victim is alone, isolated, exhausted, and ill. If needs be, the invader will terrify its victims, materializing in ghastly form, inducing grotesque visions, inciting poltergeist activity, causing objects to appear out of the blue, delivering false or tragic news, levitating objects, perhaps levitating the victim. All these things and more might be done not as ends in themselves, but as a means to an eventual complete possession. So, if you're going into an environment where you suspect or someone suspects that or admits that Ouija board has been used, that is what you're opening. That may be what the primary person who's been using it has been experiencing, but you are also opening yourself up to that because it can obsess and glom onto you and do the same thing, especially like if you have an investigation that goes on for a long time, like you go back and continue to be at the location. Some of these times, like you'll see, I don't know whether it's true or not, the Warrens living with families while it's going on. Sometimes, y'all as paranormal investigators have to invest a lot of time or more time. It's not like one night go in all the time, like we have one night or something, right? So you go in there and there's sometimes where you have to go back more than one time. True.
Yeah. Well, we do the interview first and do our walk. I'll talk to everybody. So that's one part that we do first to make sure we have everything straight and know what we're going into. You don't just do an investigation. We don't just do an investigation. We like to do the interview because sometimes we just have to say, no, we can't do the investigation depending on the location, the people, what's going on. But if we can't help them, we can try to find somebody that can. But some people, depending, for example, we go in and we know they're all on drugs and they're hallucinating and they're seeing things. well, no, we're not going in there. That's dangerous for us
Right.
as investigators because they could be opening their self up for spirit attachments, but we can't make them stop doing their drugs and
Right.
having a toxic environment. We're not going to put ourselves through that. So that's why we do the interview first because of the situations of whatever's going on, why they
Mm-hmm.
call us.
Yeah.
So we do the interview. Then, if we decide to do the investigation, we schedule it. We go and
Mm-hmm.
do the investigation. Sometimes we have to do two, sometimes we have to do more. It just depends on the activity at the time and what we pick up. We may not
Mm-hmm.
pick up anything. Depends on the spirits if they even have anything.
Right.
So after we do all that, we have to go through our evidence, which takes weeks. We have to go through. We analyze our equipment and put all of our things together. Put a packet together if we capture anything.
Right.
Um, do an evidence packet. Then we go back and do an evidence review with them.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
it takes pretty many trips for an investigation.
Well, and that's a way. I mean, to get to know the family, and you talk to
Right.
everybody who's living in the house, right? I mean, you sit down with everyone,
Besides, we
individually,
don't. Yeah, we don't do an investigation with children there at all.
right?
And we don't speak to people's children unless it's an emergency that they request us to speak to the children.
Right.
Like if the spirit is bothering the children really bad,
Mm-hmm.
then we console them and try to explain to them, help the family. Because
Right.
sometimes we walk in and the whole family is sleeping in the living room,
Right.
the whole
Mm-hmm.
family, because they're afraid to sleep in the rest of the house because of the activity that's going on.
Right.
And I
Mm-hmm.
mean, if it affects children, normally we pick up those cases first, just to give them peace of mind. Also,
Right. And one thing I'd point out too is that when you do these interviews and the process, you may come across a family who say, is having. They may admit that maybe some Ouija board use was involved, or they may not. Though they're starting to have all this, activity. They call you in, and you go and you meet them, and they may have this gloomy goth looking son, right? 14 years old, let's say, or whatever. He's going through his goth period or his emo, and you're like, oh, and a lot of people say, oh, well, yeah, it must be him. And, he's going through the death, who knows, death rock, dark ambient, whatever. Yeah. And then, you immediately say, oh, well, whatever. And then there's Buffy, his sister, and he never did a damn thing beyond maybe reading Lovecraft and the Necronomicon and, whatever, and a little bit of Crowley, maybe not even writing his feelings down in a journal. And you got Buffy, who went to a sleepover a couple of weekends ago, and guess what they did? They played with the Ouija board. They went in the bathroom and did the Bloody Mary thing. They did the Charlie Charlie thing that they saw on the internet. They fooled around with a a penguin. Where did that come from?
penguin.
You can fool with a penguin all you want, but not a pendulum. Okay, not or a penguin on a pendulum. I don't know, but anyway, a pendulum or whatever other form of divination or whatever, tarot cards, somebody had some or whatever. She might be the reason that this haunting is going on now in this family's house that had nothing going on at all. But
Correct.
you don't know that until you ask questions. You don't know that until you get face to face with the people that you're going to do the investigation with. And by far and away, if that's going to happen, and I think everybody would agree with me, if any of this, fugabooing is going to go on, it's going to be a Ouija board that somebody pulls out. First of all, it's going to be a Ouija board. Let's do it. Let's do the Ouija board. And there's a lot, just like I said, there's a lot of literature about don't do this stuff. Well, I have another quote from Dr. Wicklund, who we talked about last week, and I think in part one, Dr. Carl Wicklund, who spent 30 years among the dead, literally 30 years researching psychiatric patients and discovering that upwards of 80 to 90% of them had spiritual attachments, possession, obsession, and were not clinically insane or suffering from mental illness. So he talked about, and I'll quote him, it's really short, the serious problem of alienation and mental derangement attending ignorant psychic experiments was first brought to my attention by cases of several persons whose seemingly harmless experiences with automatic writing and the Ouija board resulted in such wild insanity that commitment to asylums was necessitated. So automatic writing is another thing that he brings up, and that is opening your body up to the use of a spirit so that they can communicate. Everybody's seen it. They all have, everybody pretty,
They channel through your body to use your hand.
Literally, they have to, and you have to allow them to do it. And there you go. You're back to boom. You gave them permission, and you don't know who this is. It's this is the thing. No, you can't trust all those spirits. If you take that away, and B, you don't know who those spirits are. So why would you trust them in the first place? Just like you wouldn't walk out in public and let somebody take control of your body that you don't know. It's no different. Just because you cannot see them doesn't mean that. And it's more likely that there's some strange, unknown spirit hanging around you because he or she is hanging around other spirits that are around you than it is any of your dead relatives or any of the great white chiefs or the spirit guides and believe me, I have to asterisk this and say there are legitimate psychics with legitimate spirit guides. I'm talking in the general sense of basically what was put forth by spiritualists, that, they're all there to guide us and they're all that crap, There's legitimate guides that have established a relationship with legitimate psychics and mediums. And then there's all this other stuff. And it could be anybody. Okay. It could really be Napoleon Bonaparte, or it could just be somebody who says that it will be whatever you want it to be. If it helps move its goal along, it will be whatever you want it to be, or whatever you want it to be. And one more quote, the occult philosopher Manly P. Hall, which anybody interested in the occult should know. He wrote, The Secret Teachings of All Ages. Huge work in occult literature. He wrote about experiences with people who ruined their lives through dabbling with Ouija. Out of every 100 such cases, at least 95 were worse off for using it. So, I mean, that's some pretty bad odds. And that doesn't just go for Ouija. I mean, Ouija gets it because everybody wants to play with it. And it's accessible. You can go in a toy store and buy it. You don't need to go, or you can buy it on Amazon. You don't need to go, into some occult specialty store to get the spirit talking board. You can just buy it, And people have wondered, well, why does it work? Why does it have such a bad reputation? Because bad things have happened, first of all. And we had that guy, Darren Wayne Evans, on in one of our shows, and he was the original guy dealing with the Zozo demon that came through the Ouija board. And while people could say, well, they could doubt him and whatever was going on, we also had a couple on that experienced the Zozo demon completely disconnected from Darren Wayne Evans. And I think in that show we were talking about how creating things in your mind and giving them names can make things become objectively real. We were talking about Slender Man, the Zozo demon, the Dybbuk. Although Dybbuks are real, but the Dybbuk that's supposed to be in that one wine box making the rounds. We should do a show. We should do a show on that. The Dybbuk and how it's after everybody, but it really is connected to Jews, and it's a Jewish family member that's the Dybbuk, right? So I think that takes out a lot of people out of the sights of the Dybbuk. Okay, so but we can get into that in another show. So I mean, you're fooling with a Ouija board. You're doing the the Charlie thing or whatever, and you're giving it a name, and there you go. You think Bloody Mary, Queen Mary Tudor, is in the mirror when you're doing the, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary? No. And why a mirror? Why has this? Because a mirror is the perfect tool for scrying with the other side. That is complete Russian roulette right there. You don't know what you're going to get. Just like the Ouija, you don't know what you're going to get when you're doing stuff like that. You don't know what's going to show up. Why on earth would you do that? My mother used to go, and I wrote about it at the beginning of my book, the experience I had at the woman's house, but she used to go see this woman who was a witch, it turns out, and was doing basically conjuring demons. And she had this big dining room table it was beautiful. It was like dark black wood, I guess, dark mahogany or indigo, maybe. It was just, and it was it was oval shaped, and it was like a glass. It was like mystifying. You were just drawn to it. It was so shiny and there were no fingerprints or anything. This thing was pristine, sitting there. And it was like you're just drawn to it. It's like a big oval of black, and you're like, whoa. And I could see myself like I look in a mirror. It was so shined up and so perfect. And she used that. She used that for scrying, for conjuring, and for doing seances in her house. And when I got bored that day because I was a freshman in high school, I went and touched all over it. I was aggravated that I had to be there, So when you put your hand down and you put your fingerprints on it and stuff, it's like, well, in my defense, I tried to wipe it off, but it just didn't. So I'm like, oh, but the thing was just like, ooh, look at that, Well, so you're in front of a mirror in the dark in the bathroom. What's the difference? And with a candle. And why is it that you have a candle and you're looking into the mirror? Why should you have a candle to call Bloody Mary? Because if you didn't have the candle, the thing on the other side couldn't see you as easily. It's drawn to that light. It's drawn to your energy. It's drawn to you calling it. Oh, Bloody Mary. Okay, I'll be Bloody Mary.
Well,
this is
something that a lot of people don't know, Alyne, that don't know about evidence of the paranormal investigators, is when we do photographs and we take pictures of mirrors and TV screens and computer screens, things like that. When we capture evidence of apparitions, they're looking at us. We don't get a back of their head view.
Yeah.
They're looking at us. We get their face in the mirrors, in the screens, in the shiny surfaces, things, because they look out of what we look into. That's,
right.
That's their portal. That's their doorway. That's why people, what in the 1800s, that would put, was it black cloth over the mirrors when their loved ones died, and they did the wake in the house, the wake houses.
Because they didn't want the spirits to get trapped with the other spirits, but also these intruding spirits can trouble the body and the body of the corpse or other people. So usually, it was black or some, if they didn't have black, they'd hurry up and put some thick blanket on it, with no light coming through. I mean, there's a lot of wisdom in these old things. There's a reason why they did that, Mirrors, if you think about it, really are bizarre. I mean, when you think about it, and everything's like a mirror world. If you allow yourself just to ruminate on the fact, you'll want to cover it no matter in your own house. Like feng shui, one of the feng shui things about mirrors in the house, they say never put a mirror, like if you open your front door, like directly across from you, that the first thing you see is you entering the house. Can't remember why, because feng shui has so many. I think it's just the energy of it. It reflects the good energy out the door. But they also say don't put a mirror across from your bed. so that it's the first
Right.
thing that you see in the morning. You don't do that either. So mirrors, trying using pendulums over water or just tables, using pendulums over mirrors. There are so many things that people could get up to, especially now that the paranormal is such a big thing. You know, it's so accessible. TikTok's full of it, YouTube's full of it, you know, Snapchat, Twitch, all this, we should do just an episode on, and we are in the future. We're working on. We're going to do some debunking of some of this stuff that shows up on YouTube, these clips and everything. But honestly, it's accessible to anybody. There's so much fakery, but then there's so much bad instruction. You know, bad, like, oh, we're just doing this. You know, we're doing the pendulum or the Charlie thing. The movie was The Gallows, and this was a few years ago. And in it, they used a pencil on a string as a pendulum. Charlie, Charlie, and you had to say it. It was kind of like a combination. The writers combined the pendulum thing with Bloody Mary, So and people started doing it. And the thing is that is a legitimate pendulum. Okay, when you begin to use it to communicate, to try to communicate, and they were calling out for Charlie. I'm like, this is so nefarious. Okay, it's wrong to. So there's just like Zozo, going back to the Ouija demon, Zozo. There was some. I know that what's her name, Rosemary Gilly. She died, the rest in peace. But she was the one that was primarily interacting with Darren Wayne Evans regarding the Zozo demon at the time, like we were talking to him. And I think she was in the, I think, and I'm gonna temper this with saying I believe, I may have misheard, but she believed that it was real and that was its name. But then, now I'm just going about things that happened. People would say, well, he was a big Led Zeppelin fan. And anybody who knows Led Zeppelin immediately has seen in their mind's eye the Zoso symbol that Jimmy Page used as his personal sigil. This guy, Darren, was very into Led Zeppelin, and it was just sort of a quirky whatever that so-called demon would take the name Zozo. The demon probably knows, the spirit probably knew of his, crazy affection for Led Zeppelin or whatever, and called itself that, or he gave it the name because of hints and things that it was given. Maybe. Okay, so that was the whole Zozo demon. I feel like it was an entity who just took that name because it basically connected with it in Darren Wayne's head, and it took that name. And there really could have been a demon. The reason I think there really was something is because a whole other group of people had an experience with that demon. And it's sort of like the whole creepypasta thing, which everybody is exposed to. Everybody knows. And now everybody knows pretty much Slender Man. And I remember we talked about this, that so much energy was put into Slender Man. They even made a movie about it, which wasn't good, but it was very atmospheric. I actually watched it more than once because of the atmosphere of the movie. It's kind of like the plot is whatever. But people began to see him. Two girls tried to kill another girl as a sacrifice to go be with Slender Man. Now, they literally said that they encountered a spirit that was Slender Man. And they didn't just come up with, oh, I got to kill somebody and then he'll take me. These were like 12 and 13-year-old girls. And they tried to kill another 12-year-old. It was terrible. In fact, just recently, the main girl, the older girl that really started the whole thing, came up for, I guess, parole, and they denied her. Good, because she's nuts now. Maybe she wasn't nuts, but she had to be kind of nuts. She was nuts because they turned around and attacked this little 12-year-old, their friend. They lured her out into the woods, and the only way, somehow or another, they said that they missed by a millimeter. They missed a major artery when they tried to stab her, and they thought she was dead, but she crawled up to the highway, and somebody stopped. And that's when they found out, and they arrested the girls. But they were so convinced in Slender Man that they did that. And my contention has always been is that they made it come to life. They created all of our mental energy, created a real entity that is not only in the internet, in the ether of the internet, it's out there. It's so many people are encountering it. So the Zozo thing was another, ball of wax that was just rolling along, and these other four people had an encounter with it. And that all started, not the Slender Man, it started with the Ouija board. The whole thing started with Darren Wayne Evans.
They're manifesting.
It's magic. Remember we talked, folks, about the planes of existence and the mental level? The mental level is where our thoughts begin to initiate and take form. In that, if you could be a thought and go on the mental plane of existence, you would see other thoughts objectively real with you. Whatever form and look they take on there, they are there. Then it comes down into the astral, or it begins to be made real. And then in the etheric way, you can come into contact with it. People who are psychic perceive things that are going to happen, and they see it before it happens because they have contact. They're in tune with the astral and mental levels. And then it comes down and it becomes reality. Or they can see the past, or they can see the future that's going to come. And in magic, when you want to do something, you focus your will and your conscience or your consciousness on that outcome, whatever it is you're doing. You project it through the mental level. When it comes down and it happens, that's the way magic works. So the demons are intelligences. The entities that we make up in our mind, and they fed Slender Man is like so wild, right? He's real. He is now, quote unquote, real, but he's objectively real. And so is the Zozo demon in whatever form. I haven't heard a lot about it, right? But so is that. And so is anything that you throw your energy into. These creatures of folklore, like, what's the one? The Weeping Woman from Mexico. They made a movie out of it and everything. And we talked about how it's mostly in Mexico, I think. La Llorona. It's not like a whole Latin American thing. People forget this, and they you'll get this video on YouTube from taken in Philippines. The La Llorona in the Philippines. No, she's connected to Mexican folklore. She is folklore come to life, right? And there has to be, at some point, there had to be the creation, either in the mind or encountering an entity, and then embellishing that entity with its story and everything. And now it's major folklore. She had a movie made about La Llorona. That's how this happens. And it can happen. You don't need a Ouija board either. I mean, this is obviously, the internet is probably the biggest Ouija board it ever created. I mean, just opening yourself up to technology in your hands and all this stuff. Now everybody not everybody, but all these people that run around screaming that they're investigating the paranormal on YouTube, they have these apps on their phones, the Phantasma app or a Necker or whatever app, and they're talking to it, and China made it. It's like you're not really using that there. But so all of those things could have gone on in this house that you've been in, including internet use and, then yoga and transcendental meditation. There are still people who do this. There are whole people whose whole lives revolve around yoga and transcendental meditation and chakra awakening and Chinese systems, like Tao, and then using the IT for divination stuff. There's so many people. They're not just new agey people either. I mean, there's commercials for pharmaceuticals with old people doing, Tao or whatever, chi, moving the chi on TV, you see them and they're all out, whatever, and they're feeling good because they took this medicine. Well, that's how mainstream since the 60s and the 70s that has become, and I'm sure all these systems are valid, but if the creators, the old Chinese wisdom, whatever, Confucius, Buddha, they'd be like face palming, like Jesus is doing all the time with us. They'd be like, oh my God, they're not using it the right way. Look at this. I mean, Buddha's face palming, like, oh my God, look, the bad feng shui. But then you get the neo-pagan, Wicca, elemental magic. And that's big, right, Dean? I mean, there's always somebody with the stones or the candles, Wicca is very popular among teenage girls, high school, teenage, that age. But, among women, it's very popular. I guess, younger women, I don't know, but there are old women, but at that point it becomes witchcraft. But there's Wicca in comparison to witchcraft. Wicca's very light. If you talk about real witchcraft, right? Wicca is the a purple candle, and then they take on the lifestyle too, which is why I was saying, you can see, you can't judge a book by its cover. There might be a girl who looks like she may have some crystals and stuff, but she's not doing any sort of Wiccan rituals or anything. She's not doing the magical rituals. She's just doing this affectation of, I like this lifestyle. I see it on Pinterest and, on Instagram, and I want to look this way. But then you get the people who are doing things and following the advice of, who knows who about rituals and, what to do, doing elemental magic and, stone magic. And and they're usually doing it alone, solitary. So in a home where somebody's up to that, and maybe they do it with nobody else, like they're not part of a coven or they don't have friends that they do it with, a la the craft maybe. But, then you have to take that into account because that puts you in touch with a whole nother group of spiritual possibilities. And that would be the elementals and the fairies and things we're going to talk about later as we get into the types of creatures and stuff. And then you got the real hardcore stuff. You've got old style witchcraft being worked, people doing necromancy because they heard about it and they think they can. And then they think they can be satanic, Luciferian, try and call demons, working with Aleister Crowley's magic. All of this, like when you open a door into somebody's house or into a building, into an abandoned building that you're doing, or, you suspect witchcraft and stuff like that. And then probably as dangerous as any of this is if the people in the house have been walking around their house before they even called you and were doing the EVPs and using the app on the phone and trying to get in touch with the thing and doing their own stuff like they see on TV before they call an actual paranormal investigator like you into the situation. So then you got these clowns running around. We're haunted now. And we can't imagine why. I don't know. So they call Dean. They call you in there.
Yes, they do. And sometimes it's natural sources that, we find, but a lot of times it's because they're doing things they're not supposed to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
And they ask us, well, I've had people ask me, well, what do you think about me going into the graveyard on Halloween and doing EVP at 18 years old? I'm like, no, why don't you just get a life and don't do that? Because you may bring something home to your family that you can't get rid of.
And then you see exactly that look. You see that look cross their face because they've already done it. They don't realize they're talking to a mom who's seen that look like 100 times. Like, you already did that, didn't you?
Then I get mom calling me because now, son and friends are in a mental institution because now they're hearing spirits screaming in their ears and stuff.
Yeah.
when I
Mm-hmm.
advise them not to do, but they
Mm-hmm.
ask, and all we can say is, no, you shouldn't do that. But people
But you
have free
did.
will,
Yeah.
they do. So
Mm-hmm.
all we can do is try to help them, but we do advise against it.
Yeah. Because obviously it's going to get you in contact with something. And we've established that, there's a lot of skeptics out there who don't believe in any of it, and they get the door to their mind gets ripped wide open in a lot of cases. They get so entrenched in it, but there's a whole group of people that I would say, let me rephrase that. The majority of people, just the general public, are pretty much accepting of paranormal stuff. And it's partly because of the big explosion in paranormal shows and, people doing it that they see on the internet. Monkey sees, monkey do's. That's what you get a lot of. And some monkey do's are just not good. I remember there was this one, speaking of graveyards, there was this one show. I don't know. I can't remember. There's so many of them. It was on TV. It wasn't on YouTube. But anyway, these two women did exactly that, which you were just describing. Two women went out to the cemetery on Halloween night. This old cemetery that they had gone to before, so they knew it was like there was a new part, but there was an old part too. So it was like one of these been there for a long time, and they said, let's go back. We're going to go back on Halloween and we're going to EVP in the old part. We're going to bring, and so they go and, they're walking around, and then all of a sudden, and they've got either the camera or their phone cameras. But I think one of them had a flashlight too, which is smart. Okay. Don't rely on that flashlight on your phone for anything. Just if you're going to go somewhere where you need a flashlight, take a flashlight. Okay. Because that light is not good. And they were poking around and scaring themselves. And then the flashlight lands on this hooded figure in the back of the cemetery, standing by this old tomb that almost looked like a table or an altar, right? So it was one of those tombs that was up out of the ground but had a cover on it. And they shined a light on him, and and he looked up, right? They didn't see that part. He kind of looked, you couldn't see his face, right? And they screamed and they ran out. And I was like, that's a perfect example. Okay. That guy is in there on Halloween for a reason. Okay. And he's dressed like that for a reason, because it's all, when you're doing Luciferian or satanic rituals, or really, and it's all in the getting your mind in the right place. So you put on the clothing and you put on everything. And he may have been working on this thing for a year, and these two women come in there and they're like, oh, screaming and he's, probably in the middle of what he's doing, and I'm like, that's not a ghost. They're like, who saw a hooded figure, the ghost of a hooded? No, that was some guy in there doing some kind of ritual stuff when these two idiots come in here on totally the wrong night and decide they want to go to a cemetery. So no, okay. I mean, and that's probably started it's haunted by a hooded figure, and so probably more and more and more people, and the guy probably went somewhere else to go do his stuff, which I don't know what he's up to. Could be anything, probably not good, but I kind of felt bad for him, because it was like, man, that guy probably prepared for that for a long time. And here they come along and scream and shrieking and running away. It's like that should happen more often, really, because it would stop some of these clowns from doing what they're doing. But anyway, to wrap it up, folks, the paranormal investigator has to have all of this in his mind or her mind when they're going out to deal with an investigation anywhere, because what people are telling you happens, you can't just go by that. And there are people who show up and film themselves, and they don't do anything. They don't do any preparation at all. And in fact, it's aggravating, because they'll go to places like the Sally House, or I don't know, like the Sloss furnaces, somewhere that's legitimately been investigated, a notable place, and they do no prep whatsoever, and they just take it wing it based on everybody else's experiences. You can't do that, especially not in a close situation like a family and a home, or a place of business where this family spends time, or where you're dealing with kids of varying ages, or even just two people. You can't just, that's not the whole, you don't come in armed with everything you've seen on TikTok. There's more preparation to
purposes.
Right. Because those people have to live there, and if you come in there and you're not serious at all, not only is it going to make their life more miserable, it's going to affect you too. Because if you don't take it seriously and you blow it off and all you're doing is trying to get clicks and views, believe me, the spirits know that. The spirits are look for these hardcore skeptics, and they wait for these hardcore skeptics, and they wait for these clowns so they can really give them one. They can really do it, especially the provokers. I love it when that happens. Because it's the equivalent of walking into somebody's house you don't know. They're sitting in their chair looking at TV and you're yelling at them, take me on. Come on, take me. You're in their place, and you're a la Zach Bagans. You fight me. Yeah. Okay. A couple of times he had some bad experiences with that were absolutely real. Not wife trying to kill him experiences. I haven't heard any more about Aaron's wife trying to kill him. I'm pretty sure she's going away for a long time, but still bad experiences. So, well, anyway, that wraps it up. Part 3. We'll be back next week with another edition of Supernatural Dangers of Paranormal Exploration. We hope you like what we're doing. We hope you like hearing and learning all this. Just let us know in the comments if you have questions or comments. And give us a like. And if you've listened this long, maybe you'll subscribe. So help us grow our channel. But anyway, we're doing it for you. So, Dean, that's a wrap.
That's a wrap.
That's a wrap. We just educated some paranormal investigators.
Yes.
Hopefully. Yes, folks. Hopefully. We mean it sincerely. Oh, all the laughing and joking aside, we do mean it. We don't want to see anybody having to deal with some sort of supernatural oppression or, heaven forbid, a possession. So just be safe out there, guys. And so next week, join us again, and we'll get into more of the supernatural dangers. So that wraps it up, Dean. We'll see you next week. Okay. Say goodnight.
Everybody.
Good night, everybody. Bye.